Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. I have a brand new video for you guys for the 2021 Vivint Houston Open. Typically in my 3-video rotation prior to the start of a tournament, I go course fit, stat fit, and then strategy video. This time around, I am going to include a recent form. And that's all we're going to talk about in this video is basically the last 7 weeks. We'll look at strokes gained. We'll look at scoring average. So obviously what that entails is their round by round scoring average. We'll see how many DK points they've been averaging, because I feel like that's just a better way of trying to analyze, recent form heading into a tournament. And since I've been looking at recent form over the last 7 weeks for all of these tournaments that I have provided golf content for, we're just going to keep it the last 7 weeks. I think it's a good number. You could argue that it should be 8. You could argue that it should be 6. I like 7. We're going to keep it at 7. So part of the reason why I change it up is because I am on the verge of being able to create a dream sheet. And I'm really trying to get this ready for the Masters. So let me go ahead and put it on the screen right now. I showcased this during the Zozo Championship, so it is there as well, but I have it right here. Have the regular tournament information that I have. So obviously I put the bucket system on there. We got the name and ID, salary, value, odds, starting hole, tee time, and then obviously those two combined to make the game. But of course then I will have golfer information, including shot shape, what part of the country they live on or live in, or what part of the world they live in, age, official world golf ranking, and then obviously we'll do the course fit piece here, which includes, last year's result, course history, the grass stats. If there's 2 types of grasses on the course, then we'll obviously include both of them. But we'll have that course fit. And then here's basically what we'll be talking about this week in this video, the recent form video. Everything here is very similar to what my strategy spreadsheets look like, which includes recent form average, DK average, scoring average, their low round, the differential, which is the differential between low round and their scoring average, how many rounds under 70, what percentage that's at, and then all the strokes gained metrics. And then unfortunately last week didn't record any scoring stats. Otherwise I probably would be doing that in this video as well, is including all the last week's scoring stats, kind of seeing, who may have played out of their element or who might be catching fire, or, anything that we can obviously talk about. And then obviously we'll compare it against season long and kind of do a plus minus. And I'm sure we'll probably live out of this section of the spreadsheet more so than any. We can always touch up on the earlier parts and then come back here and be like, yeah, I mean, Tony Finau is obviously +3 strokes gained off the tee, but, -1 approach. One of those things needs to come back to the mean. Which one is it going to be? Is it going to be both? That kind of thing. And essentially, this is what I'm working towards. So you guys get the benefit this week of seeing the recent form part of it, because I've actually been recording stats, strokes gained stats. I've been week by week and round by round gathering those stats. So really trying to grow this database that I have. I mean, I have so much data, just don't have it in a database yet. It's all on these spreadsheets, each individual different one. So eventually we'll get there. And that's kind of the long-winded explanation of why we're going to change the video rotation, why we're going to get rid of the stat fit, because it really didn't make sense, and now include this recent form tab, which I think is just going to have a lot of valuable information. So I'm looking forward to it. Timestamps can be found in the description. I do have chapter mode enabled, so the little red progress bar on YouTube, you can certainly find what section it is. For my audio viewers, hopefully wherever you're listening to this, I have it in the description of that video also, so you can skip ahead. It does not hurt my feelings whatsoever. This video is for you guys, so go ahead and get to whatever part you find interesting. So I am going to actually look at each year's recent form just to get a sense of what type of results we've actually seen relative to recent form. So I have 2021 up, but we're not gonna stay there. We're gonna go right to 2018. I guess I don't have. Oh, it's loading, which is very surprising. Can't believe it's taken this long to load. There we go. I almost thought I didn't have it, which would have been bad on me. So 2018 recent form. This was towards the 28 season, or 2018. I'm sorry, 28. Jeez, the 2018 season, and then it skips to the 2020 because it switched to the fall swing, where it's basically at now, and that just really counts towards the next season. That's why I have these different these different years compared to other people in the industry. But yeah, let's go ahead and look at 20. We'll look at 2020. Lonto Griffin won this tournament, so he's technically the defending champion, although we're playing at a different golf course. He came in with really good recent form, so he had nothing but top 20s heading into this tournament. He had 4, in fact. Underneath him, Mark Hubbard. He had 2 top 20s, a missed cut, a 40th place. So his recent form was 37.5. And in fact, if we look at everyone here in the top 10, we have 2 guys that have a miscut average, basically. That was Sepp Straka and Chad Campbell. So Chad Campbell really came out of nowhere last year. He was $6,100, missed the cut at the Sanderson Farms Championship. Sepp Straka, on the other hand, came into this tournament. He finished 4th at this tournament, but he came in with 4 straight miscuts. So that was the beginning of the season. Just miscut, 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 miscut. Boom. Finished 4th. I would love to say that this was grass related, because Shriners was a bent grass venue, I believe, or POA. I think it was bent grass, but Safeway Open was POA. The Greenbrier was bent grass. Sanderson Farms would have been Bermuda, and that's exactly what this tournament was last year, and it is this year as well. However, you know, the missed cuts from Chad Campbell and Sepp Straka came on those Bermuda tracks. So I'm trying to find, like, you know, a little bit of a, I don't know what you want to call it, but let's say they did well, or they didn't have their miscut at these venues. It makes sense that they did well on a Bermuda track if they hadn't done it prior to. But we're not seeing that, so really, we could probably see a couple guys that have terrible recent form come in here. Sepp Straka was 7,100, Chad Campbell was 6,100, so maybe leaning towards the 7.5 and below. Maybe we can find some golfers that have poor recent form that nobody will be playing, that perhaps have decent Bermuda stats, and try to chalk, you know, or try to get into those, try to own those players, pivot off of certain other ones, and gain leverage that way. But yeah, I'm not going to continue talking about 2020. Basically, as we go through this, I just really want you to pay attention to the recent form tab. And I guess for my audio listeners, I keep forgetting that I put this on audio. My apologies. In 2018, there wasn't a good recent form at the top. The best one was 28, and that was Emiliano Grillo. He finished 3rd. He was $8,500. Finished 50th at the Corrales Punta Cana, and then 26th at the API, 8th at the Honda Classic. So you could say he has 1 top 20, and you know, I guess that's something. And it was at a hard track, so it's nothing to, I guess, roll your eyes over. Jordan Spieth, on the other hand, was 11,100. He came in with a 32nd place average finishing position over the last 7 weeks prior to this tournament. That does not include the finishes at the World Match Play, but he did have a missed cut at the Valero Texas Open, or Valspar. I'm sorry, that's Valspar. 14th at the WGC Mexico, and a couple top 20s, or a few top 20s. Genesis 9th and Pebble Beach 20th. So pretty decent. 2017, we see a couple guys with really good recent form coming into this one. So you had Ricky Fowler at 10,000. He had a 9.67 average finishing position heading into this. Rafael Campos, he had finished 10th at Puerto Rico, and that's how he got here. If you remember, he kind of had it was just the 2 tournament swing, if you want to call it that, where he finished top 10. And if you didn't know, on the PGA Tour, if you finish top 10 at one event, you're automatically invited into the next week's tournament. So that's how he was able to kind of stretch over his 2 top 10 finishes. But he had obviously one finish, it was 10th, and that was what his recent form was. John Rahm came in this with 3 top 5 finishes with a recent form average of 4. But he finished at 10th place, he finished 10th place. I'm trying to insert a word that shouldn't be there. Here, let's just go through this quickly because I don't want to spend too much time only talking about recent form. And it looks like I have another slow page. I'm going to say this. We're looking at 2016, and I see 4 golfers with really good recent form. And what I mean by good recent form is better than 20. 20 or below. And that just means their average finishing position heading into this tournament was below 20. So we had 4 in 2016. In 2017 we had 3. 2018 we didn't see any. 2020 we saw 3. 2015, if it loads, it will be interesting to see if we see more. We just see 1 in 2015. 2014. Let's see what we have in 2014. We actually have 2. And then 2013. This is so surprising. I've never seen it this slow before. We technically have 2 down here at 10th place. Which means if we're looking at 2021 and want to sort this by, recent form average, we have 8 golfers that have 20th or better. So really, we could pinpoint these golfers, and maybe we anchor one of the high price guys, which obviously you can see Dustin Johnson, Tony Finau, or Russell Henley. Did we really see that in any of the other tournaments? Ricky Fowler was 10,000, so someone over 10. 2018, not really. 2016, I don't have prices, but you can bet Dustin Johnson and Henrik Stenson would have been expensive at that tournament. 2015, Jordan Spieth was up there. Again, he would have been an expensive golfer. And then Sergio we see in 2014. So really, I would say this. Picking a high-priced guy and anchoring with him is probably a good idea when it comes just strictly to recent form average. Again, average finishing position over the last 7 weeks. So I think that's actually a pretty good thing to do. And I don't know, it's really easy for me to go to Dustin or Tony Finau, really. I think either one of those golfers is going to be pretty darn good. I guess one thing we could kind of look at really quickly is, I think I only have this for 1 year, is the recent or the optimal lineup versus the $1 winning GPP. The optimal lineup last year consisted of golfers. Oh, I should say this. It only used up $44,900 out of $50,000 on DraftKings. So that means you would have left $5,100 on the table. And believe it or not, the winning lineup left $1,200 on the table. Let's go ahead and take a look. I want to make sure I don't want to be fooled by thinking that these high price guys were, poor or whatever. But as you can see, those golfers there, I wouldn't call elite. I mean, Henrik Stenson, I remember a time where Henrik Stenson was just, well, this would have been then, 2020, where he was struggling. And this was one of those years. I think Cameron Champ just came off of a win from the Safeway. But like Brian Harmon was 10-6. Daniel Berger was 10-4. Russell Henley was 10-1, and he finished 61st place. Scotty Scheffler was 99. He finished 28th. Denny McCarthy was 95, and he finished 9th. So, the high-priced guys, at least during this tournament, and let's be real here, they're not the same type of top guys that we have in this field. This field, far and away better than most of the fields we see at this tournament. Now I have to see, I got to back that up. Let's see. Monday qualifiers, but in 2018, you had Ricky Fowler at 11.5, Justin Rose at 11.4, Jordan Spieth at 11.1, Henrik Stenson at 10.5, and Phil Mickelson at 10.2. Now, those golfers at that time, I would say, were elite golfers. Phil Mickelson, I would still put him up there, not, super elite anymore, but, definitely someone who was very skilled and still is. And Henrik Stenson at that time was doing well. Justin Rose would have been a huge disappointment, as well as Ricky Fowler. Ricky Fowler was coming into the tournament with a 45.33 recent form average, while Justin Rose was coming in with a 15 recent form average. So I guess looking here, our top guys, we have DJ and Tony. Well, let's see, 2018. None of our guys in 2018 with really good recent form did well. So maybe that's a reason to play someone who doesn't have, good recent form, like any of these guys, I guess would be playable. Not that they aren't. I'm just saying. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate too much on that. Let's go ahead, dive into the meat of this this podcast, or what this particular podcast is going to go on. It's going to be looking at the recent form over the last 7 weeks. I looked at this information and I was trying to find a way or think of a way to present this to you guys without it being, overly complicated. And really, I just don't want this to be too complex. So let's go ahead and filter by salary, because I find that this is the best way to even start creating your lineups. We're going to go greater than 10,000. So we're only looking at the 5 guys that are 10K and above. When we look at the last 7 weeks and we're looking at scoring average, scoring average is basically the least amount of times to get a ball into the hole. And Tony Finau has 4 rounds. You can see that over in column O over here. He has 4 rounds, and his scoring average was 67.75. Now, this was at the Zozo Championship, if I recall. He has a 100% clip of shooting under 70. And that course played pretty easy because there really wasn't any wind protecting it. There wasn't any other weather that was protecting it. So shooting low during that round would not have been difficult. Tyrrell Hatton also played that tournament too. So Tony Finau has a 100% clip of shooting rounds under 70 over the last 7 weeks. Tyrrell Hatton would be second at 75%. He has 8 rounds under his belt. Hideki Matsuyama has 10 rounds under his belt with only 5 under 70. So that's a 50% clip. And Brooks, his first tournament back from surgery was the CJ Cup. He had 2 out of 4 rounds under 70. But his scoring average was 70.75. DK average, not bad, 74. I mean, he was scoring pretty decently. It just was, his low round was 68. So it wasn't like it was super low. It seems like his 2 rounds that were good, were obviously under par, but then his other 2 rounds weren't. Like I don't remember what happened to him on the CJ Cup, but I do remember one of his rounds kind of being like a 76 or something like that, maybe a 78, which could be concerning, but it also could provide a little bit of optimism. Like it could have just been rust. It could have been, maybe complacency. I don't want to use that, but either way, you could look at it as room for improvement, basically. I'm not too concerned. 74 points is better than Hideki Matsuyama's 66.33. I don't have cuts up here. I wish I did, but I guess that doesn't really matter that much to me. Yeah. And you can also see the recent form average over here on the side. So the most DK points scored out of this group belongs to Tony Finau. Tyrrell Hatton actually has 2 events under his belt, averaging 104.5. And Hideki Matsuyama with 3 events, 66.33. Now, we could look at these stats here and try to determine, could Hideki be better? Could he be trending in the right direction, or should we just, avoid him? I would say I'm on the path of avoiding him. It's not that I don't think he's a good course fit here. I do think he's a good course fit. There are, I don't want to so much say troubling things. I'm not going to go over low round differential or, the rest of this. We already talked about it. But if we were to go ahead and basically what I want to do is kind of compare. I want to see if this works. Okay. Let's compare strokes gained tee to green. I don't have total for season long, but if we were to go tee to green, strokes gained, and we look at each one of these golfers, actually, why don't we do that? Let's go with the recent form, how hot one of these golfers is, or just with off the tee, or tee to green, sorry. We can look at their baseline, compare it to the last 7 weeks, and we can either think of 2 things. They're going to come back to their means, or they can ride out a heater. We haven't seen, we saw some of these guys 2 weeks ago, so it's fairly close to this tournament. I wouldn't, necessarily disregard how well they played 2 weeks ago. That stuff, it tends to stay with you. And I think the more important stats are the off the tee stats. I think, if you're playing week after week, these stats are going to, I think, propel your confidence more so than, say, good putting stats or even approach stats. Because obviously, if you stick it in close with the approach, you don't make the putt, your putting stats look terrible. So obviously, if we have good approach stats and terrible putting stats, it means golfers are getting the ball somewhat close and really missing around the green. So someone like Brooks Koepka, we could look at as someone, or basically someone with optimism, because obviously off the tee, minus 2.76. We know Brooks isn't really terrible off the tee, but if we look at his baseline, minus 0.69. Obviously he can come back to the means, which means getting closer to break even, 0. But I don't know. And this obviously is including most of his conclusion of the season last year, where obviously the injury was nagging him. He played 6 consecutive events, and he missed a lot of cuts. I'm sure that the stat is largely impacted by it. We know Brooks Koepka is a good golfer off the tee, but either way, off the tee, I like to look at the baseline. And again, to me, if they've played somewhat soon, or not soon, but recent, I think that just carries on. So like someone like Tyrrell Hatton, and especially Tony Finau, I think these guys are going to have all the confidence off of the tee, which then should translate to approach. Now, if I were to pick one over the other, Tyrrell Hatton's approach game has been good too. And he typically is good on approach. I would say a lot of his weakness comes from off the tee, but obviously he's been pretty decent off the tee, and his putting is always solid. So it's no surprise to see a lot of these stats. I mean, approach and putting, I don't know so much about off the tee, but either way, he's doing well. Likewise with Tony. So the one thing I'll say about this, so the approach game hasn't been great. But again, that's how close a golfer is going to get to the hole. Because approach is basically looking at how many strokes it takes you to get in the hole, where the ball lands. So that's where you would look at approach. And if it's, 2 strokes to get in the hole from after the ball lands, like more so on average, then obviously his approach game is going to look terrible. But his off the tee stats are great, which means he could be hitting the ball really close to the hole, taking the Bryson method and just not able to get the ball close, but still rolling the ball into the hole. A lot of that can work that way. But his tee to green stats, not great. So either way, my opinion, Tony coming into this tournament, I feel like his stats alone, just thinking from a player's mentality, having the driver going for you will boost some of these other stats up. It's just whether or not he can continue somewhat of a hot putter. And I guess time will tell. I think out of all these guys, the best Bermuda stats belong to Brooks Koepka, or Dustin Johnson is the best with Bermuda. And then it was Brooks, and Tyrrell Hatton and Tony Finau, I think, are dead, in this group last. So again, you can look at the stats on here. Nothing really stands out. So I guess for my audio listeners, everybody except for Hideki Matsuyama, actually, let me take that back. Tyrrell Hatton and Brooks Koepka are actually doing better than their baseline. So their recent form, tee to green, better than their baseline. Matsuyama and Finau, worse. And obviously, we don't have anything for DJ over the last 7 weeks because he's been out. And I don't have anything from the U.S. Open, so that's another thing. When it comes to off the tee, Finau, Hatton, and actually Matsuyama are over their baseline. They're exceeding their baseline. Brooks Koepka is not. Approach. Finau is actually underperforming. Brooks Koepka is overperforming. Tyrrell Hatton is overperforming, and Matsuyama is underperforming. I guess that's a good way to put it. We should put it that way. When it comes to around the green, I don't think that it really matters. Putting, this is actually a pretty decent one to look at because we can see, a baseline is just how good the golfer is, right, at putting. And are they exceeding it? Are they not? Tyrrell Hatton, he's exceeding it, but barely. Finau, he is basically a break-even putter. He is 6 strokes up on that. So, and that's one tournament. We have to keep that in mind. That is one tournament. This will come back to the means a little bit. I would assume also his approach would get better anyways. So we'll see how that works out. Brooks Koepka's putting actually is underperforming, and Matsuyama's putting is overperforming. So that makes sense to me. If his approach game is not doing as good, obviously his putter needs to bring him back up. Okay, so that was way too long when it comes to, analyzing just 5 golfers. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit quicker. We don't want to include... There we go. Okay, when it comes to the 9K range, I'll say this. Looking at recent form, Russell Henley's coming in this with, it's hot fire. Victor Hovland, Sung Jae Im, not doing terrible, and then it kind of falls a little bit. Sergio Garcia, even with a win, 37.50, that's not super great, but it's also not going to hurt us that much. The most DK points coming to this, that belongs to Russell Henley, 105.67. Sergio's right behind him at 98.5. There's a $300 price break between those two, so I don't know how you feel about that. I would give the nod more so to Sergio than Russell Henley. I think Henley will come back a little bit from how well he has been performing. Victor Hovland, you could argue maybe a bit overpriced based off of his DK average coming into this. Sungjae Im just kind of ends up being in this happy low 9K range, and that's actually a really good price for him. So I do like Sungjae Im. Scotty Scheffler is an intriguing play, in my opinion. He can go low even when he's not playing that great, but I gotta watch out. I can't talk about every possible thing. The highest differential, to me, this is basically the potential to shoot really low. Sungjae Im is at the top, followed by Victor Hovland and Scotty Scheffler. So I do think out of this whole group of players, those three probably provide the best scoring opportunities. And when it comes to DraftKings, we definitely want that. I'm expecting Russell Henley to kind of come back to the means a little bit. The percentage of rounds under 70, Russell Henley is at the top at 75%, then followed by Sergio. So although Sergio, kind of at the bottom half of most of these stats that we talked about so far in this price range, not terrible when it comes to rounds under 70, and that's a huge thing. It is a par 70, so I imagine we're going to see the bonus hit a couple times, and probably by a lot. So I would want to target golfers that are able to get under 70, and quite frequently. The big stats that really, like what we just talked about, we look at tee to green. Obviously, Russell Henley is way overperforming, as is Sergio Garcia. A lot of these guys are. Scheffler, just barely, and same with Jason Day, just barely. So obviously these guys outplaying their baseline just by a little bit, or I guess in Henley's case, a lot of it. Off the tee, every one of these guys are in the positive, so it's really difficult to hone in one guy over the other. Approach, Scotty Scheffler minus 1.285. His baseline is actually minus 4.17, so it's not something that, approach isn't something we're really going to worry about with Scotty Scheffler, but hey, I think he's a pretty good candidate to get this closer to zero than that. And obviously, he can score pretty low. I should actually open this back up because it's one of those things of, I think is really important. When it comes to baseline, rounds under 70, Victor Hovland is the best. Scotty Scheffler is right up there too, and he actually holds the lowest round. Obviously, shot a 59 at the end of, in the playoffs, so that his differential 10.71, pretty good. And quite a bit of rounds under 70. I mean, Sungjae Im actually has the most, but actually, I don't. There shouldn't even be a but. It is. He's worth the play. Let's go ahead and talk about putting. So I think really the main stats to look at are off the tee and putting. I do want, if there's something crazy like Scheffler's approach, I do want to talk about that. Because I do think he can get it. He can bounce back from that. Now, if he did change his swing or he changed equipment, this could be a huge reason why his approach stats are not good, and it would be a bigger concern of mine. I don't know. I haven't heard, so that would be speculation on my part. But when we look at putting, Russell Henley, he's an aggressive player. So when things are clicking, he's going to make every single putt. When they're not, I'm not going to say he's going to miss every single putt, but there could be times where he will 3-putt because of how aggressive he is when he plays. So the putting stat is going to fluctuate. obviously based off of if he hits that putt in the hole right away. But I don't know if his 3-putt avoidance is high or if it's low. If you guys want to look at that, I think that'd be really interesting to think about or to look at. Yeah, we're just talking recent form, so that would be the conclusion of that. Guess what I can do is just change it to an 8. So we're out of the 9K range. We're into the 8K range. So let's just go and talk about the main points, right? Again, this is kind of the first time doing this, so I'm trying to figure out really the sweet spot of doing this. Trying to figure out the correct way of providing this information. I'm sure a lot of guys, I've already heard James Hahn's name be brought up once in a podcast. I wasn't sure why until I started spreadsheeting out my data. James Hahn, 5.5 recent form average. Really darn good. 108 DraftKings points he's been averaging over 2 events. Now, one of them ended up being the Shriners Hospital, and then the other one was the Corrales Punta Cana. So really, it's hard to use the Punta Cana one as a tournament to actually, judge his performance on, because it is a B tier event. And, I guess if you're a veteran or, I don't know, scoring can get really low. And obviously 108 points is largely affected by that. I think Hudson Swafford won it at 24 under or something like that. So a lot of guys around that 20 under mark. With that being said, the DK average is going to be pretty high. But we actually have a lot of good golfers in this range when it comes to DK average. So again, this is the average of DK points scored over the last 7 weeks. Hahn is at the top at 108. And Cam Davis, who I think is going to be a really popular play once again. He was a couple weeks ago. 94.25 is what he's been averaging over the last 7 weeks. I think he's a fantastic play. And if you're not playing Cameron Davis, you should be playing James Hahn. I think it's one or the other. But also a very compelling play at 8,400 would be Jordan Spieth. I feel like we could talk about every one of these golfers here. I think the only boring one to me would be Siwoo Kim, Shane Lowry, and Corey Connors. Those 3 guys I just don't care for. The rest of them I could see myself owning, and it's going to be really difficult to determine, which one of these I should play. I will say this: probably a smart strategy is to include one of these guys in your core, maybe 2, but include one in your core, and then however you create your lineups, whether you're doing a cascading method or some kind of randomization, if you were to pivot off of one of these guys and going right into the other guy, I don't see any issue with that. Everyone basically has a really good recent form. The only 2 that don't, Jordan Spieth and Corey Connors, which all that does, in my opinion, is just line up really good with Jordan Spieth. So I think he would definitely be a good play. Jordan Spieth, unfortunately, does not have a very good scoring average, and that's probably because he shoots a lot of rounds into the mid and high 70s to go along with some of his low rounds. He doesn't have the lowest round. 66 ends up being his lowest out of 8 rounds of golf. Not that good, but not terrible. Shane Lowry, probably one of the more disappointing ones. 67 would be his low round. And he has the worst scoring average within this range of golfers. Percentage of rounds under 70. James Hahn is at the top. 87.5% of his rounds have been under 70. That is 7 out of 8. Followed by Zach Johnson, 75. Siwoo Kim is at 75%. That's 9 out of 12 events. And then Stuart Sink, 66.67. Doc Redman and Lanto Griffin. I will say this: I will not own any 2 of these guys. I will not own any 2 of Stuart Sink, Doc Redman, or Lanto Griffin in one lineup. I might take that back. If they end up getting paired together, I might put one of those guys together. And I mean, I'm going to include either. Yeah, I don't know. I say that and now I kind of like, I want to take those words back, but I don't like any of those three golfers that much for this tournament for whatever reason. I might play a lineup with Stuart Sink and Doc Redman together, Stu and Lanto, Doc and Lanto. So those three lineups, and then I might include all three of them individually just to kind of, you know, actually it would be 4 lineups, right? Stu and Doc, Stu and Griffin, and okay, it's just 3. Anyways, so I might just include 6 lineups with these guys in it. Now I play over 50 lineups, so that's not going to be a huge percentage. I just don't like where they are, especially in this group of golfers. I would much rather go like Spieth, Hahn, or even Zach Johnson, but Cameron Davis and Brian Harman are probably some of my favorite plays. Although Brian Harman, the amount of time he's played 16 events and only 37.5% of them have been under 70. Not good. Again, really to me, let's look at the off the tee stats. No surprise to see James Hahn at the top with Cameron Davis. Obviously, if you're scoring that many DraftKings points, I would imagine those two or off the tee is going to be high. But Hahn has really been doing his damage with strokes gained approach, 6.66 over the last 7 weeks. I would much rather go with someone like Cameron Davis because he has 0 strokes gained approach over the last 7 weeks, and his baseline is 0.22, which is not terrible. Hahn, on the other hand, 1.085, that's actually pretty decent. You know, like he's known for his approach game, obviously. And his putting's terrible. So Hahn just might be the play. Like, oh my goodness. Like I said, I know some people were talking about him on their pods, but whew, it's pretty good. So I guess again, I want to look at off the tee combined with negative strokes gained putting. And then as long as something isn't super drastic between recent form and season long, the baseline stats, I want to go that route. And of course, I do like looking at, you know, season long scoring averages. So your best one is Brian Harman, 70.04. James Hahn is actually dead last when it comes to that. So Hahn has been riding a heater. If there was anyone to kind of fall from grace, it would be Hahn. So keep that in mind. The greatest differential, you know, would be Zach Johnson. He has a 61 on the year last year. That's pretty darn good. The best rounds under 70, the percentage belongs to Brian Harman and Zach Johnson. So, you know, the guys we were just talking about earlier, are they streaky or are they trending to becoming more of an elite golfer? I use elite because obviously that's where you would be trending towards, as opposed to like I don't know what you want to call him, a potato golfer, just a bad golfer. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to do the review video on this. I'm going to hide these stats again and kind of take a look, see what pops out. I'm probably more interested in looking at negative putters here, which is obviously Hahn, Redman, and Kim. See what their baseline stats are and see if there's anything like super drastic. Now, Hahn, super drastic, but obviously tee to green approach, that's also very drastic. So I really don't know how to analyze this when it comes to James Hahn, but pretty crazy. And he only has one event under his belt when it comes to strokes gained. I should say strokes gained were only recorded out of one or 1 out of 2 of his events. So keep that in mind. But yeah, really compelling group here. You know, the pepper the 8K range, as Chad Eckert likes to do. I think it's compelling, especially pairing up like a Davis with a Jordan Spieth. Oh, there are a lot of different combinations you could do here. So really, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult. Let's go ahead and go to the 7K range. A few more golfers here. What do we have? 34 in total. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to talk about this. We'll just have to try to go as quick as possible. Best recent form in the field would be Ollie Schneiderjans at this price. Again, between 7 and 7.9 on DraftKings. Ollie Schneiderjans last week scored really well. Did really well. So he finished 3rd last week, obviously. One event under his belt. It's going to be difficult to really, take that into consideration. You can obviously think of his round last week as, maybe a little warm-up session to do well. He has to in order to try to get his PGA Tour card. He just needs to string along a bunch of top 10s and then maybe get special temporary status. We'll see. I don't know how much pressure is on him, how he feels about it, but yeah. What's crazy is his differential. When we look at that, scoring average 67.75, low round is 66. He had 3 rounds out of 4 under 70. Last week, I think, was a par 71. So maybe he just shot 70 on the button and everything else was 66, 66, 66, maybe. Can't remember, but either way. I don't want to stay on that guy too long. Let me give you the top. I'm just going to name off the top 10 golfers when it comes to recent form. You have Ollie Schneiderjans, Lee Westwood, Matthew Naismith, Eric Van Rooyen, Denny McCarthy, Wyndham Clark, Scott Piercy, Emiliano Grillo, Martin Laird, Adam Schenk. I guess I don't want to create this. I don't want to make this video longer than what it has to be, but I also want to provide all the information I possibly can, which I know there's a fine line you have to toe in order to do that. Scoring average. Here are some interesting golfers that I think have good scoring average that maybe aren't being talked about over the last 7 weeks. Brandt Snedeker. I absolutely loathe playing Brandt Snedeker. He disappoints me more often than not, but 68.50 over the last 7 weeks, pretty good. That's 8 rounds of golf, and 5 of them were under 70. So 62.5% is his clip of rounds under 70, and his low round is 63, which is one of the lowest in the field for the last 7 weeks, which is pretty crazy. You have Martin Laird up there, who just won the Shriners not too long ago. Denny McCarthy's been playing really well recently. I believe Bermuda is a grass that he's pretty decent at. So obviously the recent form coming into this with the course fit, probably decent. Wyndham Clark, I think, is an interesting play. Scott Piercy at 7,200. That looks pretty good. He looks like a good play. I think the course will require a fade, in his recent form to go along with his course fit, I think, is actually pretty decent. Let's talk about the best golfers shooting under 70. That would be Ollie Schneiderjans, Aaron Wise, Matthew Naismith, Martin Laird, Harold Varner III, Brandt Snedeker, Sam Burns, Wyndham Clark, Scott Piercy, and JT Poston. Should have given you the percentages, but that ranges from 75. So really, Aaron Wise and Ollie, the only golfers over 70%. Everyone else kind of falls in between 66 and 58% that I just rattled off. But again, let's go to the off the tee stats. Who's been hitting the ball really well? Sam Burns, believe it or not, but his approach and off the green look terrible, and his putting's really good. Obviously, negative strokes gained approach usually is going to have positive putting. I would almost rather try to find a negative putter with good strokes gained. So why don't we just put a condition on here, and we'll go less than 0. Actually, yeah, less than 0.4. And this would be the list of golfers that okay, so those with negative putting stats to go along with positive off the tee. It's a small list. Sepp Straka, Luke List, Scott Piercy, Henrik Stenson, Dylan Fratelli, Keegan Bradley, Lucas Glover, and Wyndham Clark. So if we're thinking about recent form, I would have to say I like Wyndham Clark. I actually do like Scott Piercy. And like I want to like Luke List. I want him to do well, but looking at his bucket score and it's not good. But when it comes to looking at baselines, you know, especially with putting, Wyndham, I mean, basically each one of these guys, their baseline is much better than how their putting stats have been recently. And no one except for Scott Piercy. Scott Piercy's ball striking, his approach game has been pretty good. So maybe I remove Scott Piercy out of that list. Wyndham Clark just becomes way more compelling now that I look at this. I don't know how much of an advantage he's going to get with his length at this course, because that's obviously one of his strengths. But so far, you know, his recent form's been pretty good. Let's see here. Let's open this back up. Look at scoring average. Your best scoring average season long would be, it belongs to Alex Noren, HV3, JT Poston, Denny McCarthy, Cameron Tringali. What I can do here is, why don't we do this? I should be filtering more, and this is how I should do this going forward. So let's go less than or equal to, just saw what number I wanted, 70.86, okay. Just do, yeah, 70.86. Look at that, and then we can go by scoring average over here and just see who's the best. So Brant Snedeker, Matthew Naismith, Denny McCarthy, Kevin Streelman, JT Poston, Taylor Gooch, which is interesting. Rounds under 70, Matthew Naismith. So really, Matthew Naismith is popping up a ton. Him and Brant Snedeker, which would be really interesting plays to do. How about off the tee? Our positive off the tee guys. You know, Naismith is up there with, he actually has super good putting stats, which is kind of scary. So $7,000. Why is Matthew Naismith popping? What's going on here? An 8th at the Shriners, a 17th at the Safeway, or not Safeway, Sanderson Farms, and 41st at Corrales Punta Cana. So 220, you know, top 20 finishes. So that's probably why his stats are pretty good. Man, Keegan Bradley's kind of just staring at me right now. Tyler Duncan has the best, you know, differential for season long. Again, that's just scoring average minus low round. Does not have a super low round this year though. I don't know, Snedeker and Naismith, those are just two names that are sticking out to me, and they're sticking out like a sore thumb. So interesting to see how well they do. And let's get to the last little bit here. So we'll go less than 7K. And all I want to do is really just look at scoring stats when it comes to these guys. So John has the best recent form at 19. That's one event. So he obviously finished 19th at, you know, probably the Corrales Punta Cana, which isn't that impressive. Padraig Harrington has a 26th place. from last week. That isn't that impressive. Hoagie, 4 events, 34.25 average DK points, 81 over those 4 events. That's pretty good, pretty decent. I guess when we look at recent form, this is where it kind of really falls off. Scott Stallings, 39. Bo Hosler, 39.5. It's not looking good as we get down here. If you look at DK points, the average, again, John Huh, only 1 event under his belt, 103.5. Rory Sabatini is second on that list, 93.75. That's 2 events under his belt. Austin Cook also has 2 events under his belt, 82.50. Hoagie then has the most events here with the best DK average. 4 events, 81 ends up being his. The next guy, Bo Hosler, 4 events under his belt, 74.5. So really, Bo Hosler might not be a terrible pivot from Tom Hoagie or vice versa. So, if we're making lineups and we're looking for anchors or whatever, I think, starting with one of those guys and pivoting on a couple lineups, not terrible. Scoring average, the best belongs to John Huh, which obviously makes sense. He has the best DK average, but again, that is only 1 event, and he had all 4 of them under 70. Let's go see what that event was, because if it was one of those alternate events, it's not that important. But it was the Shriners, so that's not terrible. That's pretty good. So he might be worth a speculative play. I'll say this when we talk about it tomorrow. John Huh, he's a last year 5. Probably not really going to consider him. But I always play, usually I'll play every 6K guy at least once. And that's depending on how many lineups I create. So if it's around 70 to 80, each one of these guys would be played at least once. But I don't want to stick onto this too much. The best rounds under 70 percentage obviously belongs to John Huh. Then Brian Gay. He has 6 events. Maverick McNeely has 10 events under his belt, and he is shot under 70 7 times. So that's 70%. That's not terrible. But like we did with the 8K range or the 7K range, let's go ahead, look at all of our negative putters. Again, I'm going to make it 0.4, which obviously doesn't make everyone negative. But then let's filter by off the tee stats. So Carlos Ortiz, already a good course fit. It's looking like the recent form fit isn't terrible either. We can obviously look at his scoring average, 70.06, not terrible. I wish I had the field average on here for you guys. That is something I will include for the Masters. That definitely makes a lot of sense to put that on here. But it's a green color. Yellow is right in the middle. So obviously he is better than field average. Rounds under 70, not good though. 33.33%. That's not a good thing. He's definitely not getting the ball in the hole the least amount of times that you possibly can. Andrew Landry seems like a decent play. Again, this is sorted by off the tee with a negative putt or negative putting. I think really anyone, if you wanted to live with anyone in here, not terrible. Francesco Molinari, believe it or not, is on that list. That's a really interesting play. And Francesco's putting, minus 3.69. Yeah, I don't think that's going to really stay there, but that's with also negative strokes gained approach. That's not good. Scott Stallings would be the second guy on this list underneath Carlos Ortiz, and I think he's also a pretty decent play as well. Negative putting for him as well. I would love to play Patrick Rogers, but he is a 5.5, and he's not trending in the right direction. His recent form looks terrible. Despite his positive off the tee, I mean, he is, of negative putters, he is the 6th best golfer off the tee. I'm just going to stay away from him. I don't think that is a good play whatsoever. Actually, let's look at who's we only have we only have 6 golfers that have positive tee to green or strokes gained total stats with negative putting. And only Carlos Ortiz, Beau Hosler, Scott Stallings, and John Huh have positive off the tee stats. So I guess if I'm targeting anyone in the 6K range, it's probably going to be one of those guys. Let's go ahead and open this up to everybody now. Rory Sabatini's up there. Great positive off the tee stats. And his putting is doing pretty decent. Same with, not so much same with CT Pan. His putting stats are good. Tom Hoagie's up there, minus 0.18. Let's see what this looks like in comparison to their baseline. Hoagie at 0.018, so he's doing better than he typically does. He is over his baseline. Looks like he's over his baseline in every stat. So obviously he's riding a little bit of a heater. And at $6,700, not terrible. Honestly, not terrible whatsoever. Let's see here. What do I want to cover? I think just looking at baseline scoring average is always a good thing to do. Mark Hubbard has the best baseline scoring average, 70.41. Currently, he's at 70.13, which is not terrible. The rounds under 70 aren't good, and his low round is not good either. He was leading the PGA last year in how many rounds under 70 he had. He's obviously just not playing that well. Off the tee's not good. Probably staying away from that. Carlos Ortiz just continues to pop out. Same with Tom Hoagie, Scott Stallings. We could also include Danny Lee and Rory Sabatini. I'm not afraid to play any of those guys. I think they are pretty decent. Yeah, when we sort this by rounds under 70 baseline, Mark Hubbard is up there at the top, and his round under 70 percentage is pretty darn good, 48.96%. So you can either think of Mark Hubbard as somebody who's going to turn it around, or you can just see that he's struggling and it might be best to avoid him. But when we look at baseline off the tee, again, to me, this is a good stat to look at. Patrick Rogers is actually, is he doing better than his baseline? 0.875, 0.5, so yes, he is. Actually, almost every one of these guys. Carlos Ortiz is back up there again. Austin Cook is up there. We talked about him, and Beau Hosler. So really the guys that are kind of popping out would be Carlos Ortiz, Beau Hosler, even Austin Cook. And I know John Huh was a part of that conversation. So all in all, I don't think those are terrible plays at all, especially when they're off the tee games already good. And I'm using off the tee because to me, it's the best way for confidence, honestly. It's going to provide better confidence. Those that have negative off the tee stats, I mean, depending on mentality, if you are struggling off the tee, you're already putting yourself behind the 8 ball. You know, most golf courses are par 72, meaning you average 4 shots a hole. If off the tee, you are putting yourself in difficult situations, you know, getting into the hole within 3 shots from there might be a little difficult. But one thing I'll add to that is this course doesn't look like it has a lot of trouble. So those that actually do have negative off the tee stats, I'm not sure I really find that to be a bad thing necessarily. So really, I think just finding the guys who are shooting low scores, regardless of what their off the tee stats are, their approach stats or whatever, finding those guys might be your best bet. Carlos Ortiz does sneak up top 20 in this 6K range, but Austin Cook, Rory Sabatini, Scott Stallings, and Tom Hoagie really stand out when it comes to recent form. So that is going to conclude this video. That is the rest of the 6K golfers. So there are no other price ranges that I want to talk about, and the video is already running an hour long. So hopefully you enjoyed it. I will sharpen this up in the future. It was the first time going over it, so I wasn't sure how I wanted to approach it, but for the most part, I think, this will be fun, getting through this. And again, I think doing it by price range is probably the best way to do it. That way we can kind of anchor down on some positions, maybe grab a few players from those price ranges, create our lineups, and pivot to the other guys that obviously we're talking about were good. But again, it'll be interesting to do the review on this, put the results next to, what the recent form looked like. Obviously, we didn't have last week's stats, but that would have been really interesting to look at, to compare with this. So all in all, I think it went okay. I know it can get better, so I will be shooting for that during the Masters, but I will be doing something similar like this for the Masters. And before I go, one really quick thing. I keep forgetting about this, and I apologize, Chad. But Chad Eckert and I from the Fantasy Golf Pod, we are putting together a DraftKings spreadsheet. Now, we're going to have two available. One of them is going to be basically the spreadsheet you've been seeing from us from the Tour Championship and the US Open. The more detailed one is actually going to be it's only going to be available for those that purchase it. So you'll have to go to Chad's Patreon page, purchase the spreadsheet there. I'm not exactly sure what's going to be precisely on it, but I think what I can try to tell you guys is I'm going to have the golfer's shot shape on there. I will have their age. We'll have their world golf ranking, what residence they come from, where their college is. We'll have all of that information. I will include grass stats. And I'm more than likely going to create recent form. I will more than likely create this recent form tab, so that will be available for you guys. And we can obviously include season long. We will also have last 3 months of data, for strokes gained and stuff like that. So it will be a robust spreadsheet, and I think it'll be worth every penny. So you can see that on Chad's Patreon. I will be tweeting it, so if you follow me on Twitter, you can see it there. When I do my Masters videos, I will be plugging it. I will be giving you links that you can get to, but keep your eye on that on the horizon. So it will be available hopefully by the end of this week. If not, the weekend, definitely, for sure. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in a strategy video tomorrow. Okay, bye.